vertical farming is like redefining that term, and they've started to use the term hyperlocal because you have like these chefs growing these mushrooms in a container farm, like right next to the restaurant, right? So you literally are picking the mushroom, cooking it, and putting it on the plate, and so you can just literally show the diner that like this is about as local as it gets, and you
Yeah.
can taste the difference. And I've been more aware when I'm in the grocery stores.
This episode of Grounded in Maine is sponsored by ESG Review. ESG Review magazine is published quarterly in February, May, August, and November and is available for free in print and digital formats. ESG Review is devoted to environmental, social, and governance strategies, technologies, and investments. ESGreview.net is updated every Wednesday with 8 new stories and is home to feature articles, news items, and more. Visit esgreview.net to stay informed and help us spark the collaboration and awareness needed to develop sustainable economies and communities around the world.
There's a place where there's no trouble, no more pain, no more struggle.
Grounded in Maine podcast is an open conversation about how we show up for the world. I started this podcast out of a desire to learn new ways to be sustainable because the word sustainability is big. It can be overwhelming, and I just wanted to learn, different ways to try to be part of the solution and not feel like it's too late. So I'm talking to people who are doing different things and learning so much. I hope you are too. Hi, this is Amy. I am putting out a call to action to just get a little bit of extra involvement. I'm on a mission, I guess, to find out who my listeners are. If you have been responding to me or, however that all works, I am on social media. So if you are interacting with me on social media, I so appreciate that. If you are not, if you don't mind doing so, for me, knowing who's listening is more important to me than the numbers. I just want to know who you are. James was just telling me that a couple of his recent clients said that they're listening to my podcast, and I have no idea who these people are. So I don't want that to be the norm. I would love to be able to thank you for listening. I would love to be able to offer you something that would make this more worthwhile for you. So please let me know if you're listening. And if you don't mind leaving either a rating or a review wherever you're listening, and clicking links in the show notes. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but it is adding traffic to whatever it is we're offering. So if you don't mind doing that, that would be amazing. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for listening, and let's get back to the episode. Hi there. Thank you so much for listening to Grounded in Maine today. My name is Amy Fagan, and my guest today is Harry Duran. If you are familiar with anyone in the podcasting world, you may have heard of Harry. And I have worked in a workshop group with Harry, and I was a guest on his podcast called Podcast Junkies. He also has another podcast called Vertical Farming Podcast. He is also a DJ and music lover, and has recently in the last 5 years moved from New York City to Minnesota. So he's gone from city to country, which I just think it's a fun I just love that story. The journey of city to country, and finding the benefits of slowing down and making your own stuff, and being responsible for yourself. I just think, and it's also fun for Harry because he's been in the city for his whole life. Anyway, I hope that you guys enjoy this. If you don't mind sharing with somebody that you think would enjoy it, or leave a rating or review wherever you're listening, I would so appreciate that. And I will talk to you guys again next week. Today, my guest is in the podcasting world, people would say that's a great get, but other people may not know him. But so anyway, today I'm talking with Harry Duran. Harry is he's a longtime podcaster. When did you started
2014.
2014,
Yeah.
10 years ago. My gosh. But thank you so much for being on. And you have two podcasts. You have two podcasts, one that I was on and the other I was not on because I don't know anything about it. But so Harry is the host of Podcast Junkies.
This first was Podcast Junkies in 2014, and then the Vertical Farming Podcast in 2020. I started that.
Yeah. And so funny story about Harry, and I probably told you this, but I think I did Podfest virtually my first year, 2022.
Okay.
And I had seen something about someone doing a vertical farming, and I was like, "Ooh, that's totally in the sustainability realm. I'm going to reach out to him," even though I hadn't started yet. And so I can't remember. I must have emailed. No, I didn't email you, but something like I reached out to you and I was like, "Hey, you want to be on my podcast?" And you're like, "Scram, kid, talk to me when you have a real show," basically. And so here we are.
Yeah, look at that.
But Harry, you're in Minnesota now, right?
Yes.
You're in Minnesota, but you're from the big state of New York.
Yes, grew up in New York.
Yeah, and you recently moved to Minnesota.
Well, moved in 2019, but we were living in the city in Uptown, and now we're living about 30 minutes outside.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and life is a little different.
Yes.
In Minnesota. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. A little slower in the Midwest than it is.
Yeah.
I've lived in New York. I've lived in Atlanta as well for a bit, and then I've lived in LA. So just always on the coast, and it's the first time I've had a taste of Midwest life.
How's it going?
It's good. It took some getting used to, and just things are done differently here, and I think just my energy had to find its place here because my partner Natalie is the person to tell you. Like, when I first got here, I wasn't really like making eye contact with people, and I just wasn't that engaging with folks. And just coming from New York City, you just develop this like thick skin, and you just stick with your social group, and it's not a lot of like socializing just randomly and just saying hi to random folks and how was your day and all that sort of stuff, which tends to happen a lot here in the Midwest. So it was just a matter of just getting used to it and just, showing up to a restaurant, and instead of saying like, Harry Duran is, table for two, like, it's like, oh, hi, how are you? Like, how's your day going? So it's like little things like that. Just take some getting used to. Yeah.
That's really fun. And so you're about 5 years in living
Yeah.
in the slower
Yeah,
pace.
it's crazy. It's coming up on 5 years because we moved. I moved here. I went through a divorce and a separation, so I was a bit nomadic for about a year, and then settled in here because it's where my partner's from. And it was my first taste of Minneapolis, and so we moved to Uptown. So for those that don't know, it's sort of like that's the kind of city vibe. It's got apartment buildings and some restaurants, and you can walk to stuff. And we had an Apple store literally around the corner from us, and cool bars and stuff. And all that came to a crashing halt like 6 months later with the 1-2 combo of COVID and then the George Floyd riots. So it was pretty crazy couple of years.
Oh, yeah, it went from not fun to like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
what did we do?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't think about that with the timing.
Yeah.
But now you recently got chickens, so you've got some little chicks.
Yeah.
But so I have Harry on here because of the vertical farming podcast, but also because I know that Harry has done this whole slowdown thing, which I think is super cool. People, especially in the New York area, are like, I can't sustainability, like what, but I'm in the city and everything is right here and everything's so easy. But now you're like, I know that you are helping to make jam and that now you've got the chickens and the plants and you're like following the turkeys.
Yeah. There's a lot happening here. I think so. This is the house where my partner grew up. This is her childhood home, and she was the last person to tell you that she would come back here. But After that apartment we were in Uptown, we were there for about year and a half, probably a year too long. And it was cool. It was like loft style, very New York City type of vibes. You know, we had a street floor apartment with like tall windows. And so our door led out straight into the sidewalk, which is cool. And then it's not cool. So when you're dealing with like riots and like
A little
stores being shut down and all that crazy energy going on. So we moved to another place that was what's called South Uptown. It was a house, it was a duplex, so it was quieter. It had a fireplace. It was on a one-way street, so definitely it was a slow, you know, a way to slow down for us, and it was nice because it was like a bigger place, so it was starting to feel more cozy. And then when that was up, you know, we were just going to come here temporarily, but as we started spending more time here, it's on just under an acre of land. There's a marsh that abuts the property, and her parents had like, you know, they had some active neighbors on the other side of the marsh who were smart enough to realize, hey, we better like chip in and just figure out if we can buy this property because, and then this was, I think it was like 20, 30 years ago. So I think they all had to chip in a couple $1,000 or something. I forgot how many houses it was or whatever it was, but they were able to do it and donate the land back to the state. So it's just now protected land. It's a protected marsh, and so I actually can see out. It's my view here because I have a separate garage from the house and the back door to my office here, which for those that are watching on YouTube can see my partner's father built this extension and loves wood. So it looks like I'm in a sauna right now. But yeah, this was his man cave previously, and now it's my podcasting office. Yeah.
Cool. Oh wow. So are you in the garage?
It's they call it the garage, but it's not, I mean there's no car in here. It's just like we have, you know, there's through the door that's behind me that it's kind of like a storage space. We have our gym in there, and just that's where we moved in all our stuff when we moved. But there's a regular garage like next to the house, so it's
Yeah.
kind of like they call it a standalone garage, but it's really more like like a separate, you know,
Okay.
office. Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
And so did you ever dream that you would be in this, like,
No,
make this big kind of a move?
no. I mean, I've always, like I said, been a city boy. I mean, I grew up in Yonkers, New York, which, if you're looking at a map, for those that are not familiar with Yonkers, it's Manhattan, then the Bronx, and then Yonkers. So Yonkers is the first city outside of New York City. And so like New York City was like my backyard, you know. So as soon as you know, I would go in a couple of times with my folks and, you know, go see the sights. World Trade Center, you know, they took us there, Statue of Liberty, all the sites. And you know, as soon as I was like 17, 18 out of college, and, you know, just began spending a lot of time there, eventually moved there, lived in like multiple places, Upper East Side, East Village, Brooklyn. So it's really like my heart home. And I've always had a passion for it. And then got married, and then we moved to Atlanta. So I was there. It's interesting because in Atlanta we were renting a house, and that was the first time we kind of had our own house, and I had a backyard and tried a garden thing. It didn't work at all. I did like, you
So
know,
hot
like
in
a,
Atlanta.
yeah, it gets very hot in Atlanta. So I think I grew one tomato. That's about it. And then we eventually came back to New York, and then and then we moved to LA. So, you know, rented a house there with really no backyard. So I've never really thought about the idea of like having this much land. And then when this came up, and this, you know, we were going to the property, I mean, there's this weight of thinking about all the things that can go wrong with a house, because as a homeowner, you know, it's like it's your responsibility to fix. But, you know, the more time we spent here, it's got its own well, so we have our own source of water, which is huge, you know, and it's an important thing to think about. I was in New York for Hurricane Sandy. I forgot what year that was.
That was
2000. Yeah,
2011.
yeah. And so when with my ex-wife, we were living in an apartment in East Village, and when that blew, we were looking across to Brooklyn, and we saw, because I think that's where the Con Edison plant was, and what kind of blew. And then everything from 57th Street down went black. So there was no power. And so we lost water for a day. And I think we were on the fifth floor, or maybe I forgot. I get the apartments mixed up. But we lost water that first night, and we were like tying the perishable stuff in like baggies and like hanging it outside the window, because I think it was like October-ish sometime. and then the power was gone for like a week. So thankfully we had a friend that lived in Spanish Harlem, so we got on our bikes and we would go up there and we'd like shower and we'd like charge our laptops up and our phones up. But it was so eerie because we'd ride the bikes back down, and then as soon as you hit 57th Street, it was lights, 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 and then no lights. And so you're riding your bike and you're looking down each street as you're riding down Manhattan. It's just pitch black. It's wild. But it was also interesting because you start thinking about like, sovereignty and access to food and like all the things that you take for granted are like not there, and we would go by and because there's a lot of sub basements in New York and a lot of stuff got flooded, the apartment complex next door to us, I think, had a 3-floor or 3-level underground garage. You can just imagine how many cars were down there. They all got flooded. All the insurance companies were sending RVs of agents, to kind of handle the hundreds of claims that people were claiming their cars were completely damaged, total water damaged. But it was like, there was guys on bicycles charging phones up with like a battery power, like some sort of bicycle that was charging up. It's like there's a generator. But you were just thinking about all these things, like, people were obviously making a run on the supermarkets because we had to go buy stuff up at the past 57th Street because everything below had no power. So that was a small taste of like what it would be like. And obviously through COVID, had that again happen where, people are, worried about their food. When people that live in cities and they just think everything comes shrink wrapped and is available, and just being here just had more of an awareness for that. And my partner's father is a hunter, and so he's hunted since he was young. He doesn't do it as much anymore, but it's venison, turkey, fishing, so it's like it's really interesting. And then we've got my brother-in-law is the avid hunter and fisherman. So, we've had access to that food, we get access to that venison, that fish, and it's so interesting to kind of think about the ability to sustain yourself and how long you would last if like, everything hit the fan.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everything kind of did, but
yeah,
you were not there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, and it not like, I'm trying to find words, but like in the city, everything is it's so convenient. Everything is right there. But then, we don't think about what if it's not there, and then, so Hurricane Sandy it was in September because my sister went to New Jersey for that. She was doing testing.
Yeah.
And it was right after my wedding.
Okay.
Within a week. But it's so true, and it's cool that you get this taste to know, that you have the comparison. And so let's see. So you've helped out making jam. You're raising chickens. Are you gardening?
Yeah. So essentially, as we started to look at the property, I mean, it's a lot of land and there's a lot of grass, and Natalie wasn't as crazy about having that much grass to take care of. Thankfully, we have someone that kind of does it and comes every once in a while. But over time, you just like, it doesn't feel like that's sustainable. And so we started looking at other options. And so one of the first things to think about was kind of restoring a back garden that was here next to this outside garage. And so, but that had to get like completely, she discovered this, or we started doing research, and there's this thing called like, I think it's called the lasagna method, where you put like cardboard down and then you put dirt, and then you try to put more like mulch on top of that. And I think it was towards the winter because we had still gotten like some snow days. So we were able to like throw actual mounds of snow on there. And that was helpful to start that. And we got some dirt shipped in. So that back garden, it's trial and error, because I think we realized that the dirt that we ordered probably should have been more of a sandy mix, because we were planting potatoes and radishes. And apparently you need more of a sand mix with the soil, because you need some aeration when you're doing root vegetables. So again, learning, we had to put up a whole deer netting around the entire garden. Then we built a similar type garden towards the front of this outside garage, and she had been watching a ton of videos about this woman Bree, who's got this amazing garden. So there's a lot of tips about things to do, and we built this like hoop thing. We're using cattle panel, I think it's called. Like, I'm learning all these cattle panel and
like squash,
squash. Hardware cloth and all this stuff like this. But it's interesting. And so we had to go. We're shopping at places called Tractor Supply now. So look, we had to go get cattle panel, and that stuff is really like heavy gauge, so they had to wrap it in this big kind of like loop, and then it couldn't fit in the car, so they had to like put like a million plastic ties on it and then strap it to the top of our car. So it's like that was the only way it was gonna get here. And it was so funny because we were there, and there was like, that's so funny. We had a couple come in from Minneapolis like yesterday, and out of all things, they actually had a Crosstrek. We have a Crosstrek, Subaru Crosstrek. So they actually had a Crosstrek Subaru, and they actually wanted the same panels as well. It's so weird that I
Oh,
wonder if they were watching the same video or something like that, getting the idea. So the idea is to kind of like have it for your like squash and climbing vegetables. So it didn't really work out this season because the squash we planted wasn't climbing squash, and we didn't really plant as much stuff that was climbing. So it's just like a nice hoop there's not a lot going on. But we planted some so in the back garden, just potatoes, radishes, corn, some beans, and onions. And then in the front garden, we're doing tomatoes, lots of tomatoes, squash. We even had pumpkins. I think we put them towards the back because we had a ton of those. I don't know what's going to happen with those yet. But then trying to build a deer fence around the front garden, we ran out of the deer type of fencing, but we had some of that other thinner cloth, and that didn't work out because you can clearly see the section that uses that. The kind of rabbits figured out that one out. So
yep.
we lost that battle. But we kind of wrote it off as like a get this everything set up
Yeah.
year because there was so much to do, and we just ordered a couple of trees as well for privacy. So we've got ordered a maple tree, a willow tree, 2 peach trees,
Nice.
and then some like tall grasses for a strip that's between us and the neighbors because there was a bunch of buckthorn there that had to get torn down, which is really invasive.
Right.
Yeah, so you're just learning all these things, and then as you walk around the house, there's we have a lot of wild turkeys that come in, which of course my partner likes to feed. So now they just kind of hang out, and then we
Knock
knew we
on the
wanted to,
door.
yeah. I have them come here sometimes, and I have double doors looking out into the marsh, and they'll come over and they'll start pecking at the window. So they're that used to like us feeding them. But as far as the chickens, we kind of knew we wanted them, so we were just holding off for a while, trying to figure out what kind of how many we wanted, and we heard like sometimes you lose some when they get shipped over. So we ended up ordering 6. One didn't make it that first day, and so we ended up with 5, and then we had to get a chicken coop. We had one that as we were looking at it, we are like, this is going to be too small, so we had to return it and get another one.
Mm.
And just all the things that like it didn't fit in the car, so we had to actually unpack the chicken coop pieces and then put those pieces into the car one by one because the box itself didn't fit. So all these things you got to like think about because most people, I guess, that are doing this sort of stuff probably have like a pickup truck or something like that. So just all these things you don't think about when you're like
Right.
not worried about, I call it farm life. It's not a farm, but it's enough of a farm for me. So yeah, all the just little things you just gotta keep on top of. We started getting a lot of flies, so now we got to get those bags of like fly traps, which apparently work extremely well because there's like literally probably like 100 flies in there. It's pretty crazy. So yeah, I think that what's interesting is like you're always I don't want battling or in relationship with the elements
Mm-hmm.
and the animals.
Right. You just have to
Yeah.
navigate what's around you.
Yeah.
Work with it or grow. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't recommend mint for pests because that doesn't work. They don't hate it like they're supposed to.
Yeah, the peppermint, I think we tried to spray that because we hang up a hummingbird feeder and we try to spray it on the wall. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And then we had to get lime for around the chicken coop, and that's supposed to keep out bugs as well. So apparently you can scatter that around your house too if you want to keep out ants and stuff like that. So yeah, just figuring out all the different ways to develop a relationship with all the critters. We even have we had a mouse come into the house, and her dad used to have like a regular mouse trap, but my partner does not like killing any animal, so we figured out a trap that's like one of those 5-gallon buckets, and it has like this top that has like a seesaw door. So you put the nut on the door, mouse goes in, hits it, falls into the bucket, and so now every morning we got to check the bucket, make sure if there's a mouse in there, and then we got to take the bucket and like
Right.
humanely let it out. So all stuff like that.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you have a hummingbird feeder. Have you had hummingbirds?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
that
we get them
like
all
the
the time.
most exciting thing? Every day I'm like, oh my gosh, there's the hummingbird. I've never seen them before, but I'm just so happy when they come and I'm like, oh gosh, right now it's so hot.
Yeah,
They're not going to want to drink that hot water. So every few days I have to refresh it and
yeah.
I'll go out midday and I'll like put a couple ice cubes in there.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, and then we had to get a squirrel-proof bird feeder too because they just love
They love them.
pulling some Cirque du Soleil moves and just they'll climb on. We have a little suet feeder, and they'll jump on that. But they were just eating all the seeds, and it was like this is crazy. So the squirrel busters just kind of the weight of a squirrel will like push it down, pull it down the outside of it, and then it just blocks off the part where they can't get in there. So
It's
that's
better
helped.
than TV, isn't it?
That's what?
It's better than TV. I love. I mean, we have the feeders right at the dining room table, like outside,
Yeah.
of course. But
Yeah, we have them in front of our kitchen window, and then
morning breakfast.
if we forget to bring it in, then we've got Mr. Raccoon coming at like 3 a.m.
Oh, you have to bring it in.
Yeah, we have to bring it in because the raccoon has figured out how to pull it to him or her and eat the seeds without activating the scroll busting feature. So now it's like, okay. So it's like it's nonstop. It was like I'm just like what's next? So
That close
I've
to
learned to
midnight.
like be more at peace with it because it was just getting under my skin and maybe it's a New Yorker in me. I was just like this is just out of control. So you just got to manage all the aspects of it. But I think I'm finding my peace with it.
I think I mean, it's true. I don't love the raccoons when they come. We have had our trash can knocked over and stuff, but
Hmm.
just have to learn to navigate it, I guess, and
Yeah.
you said make peace with it.
Yeah.
I buy so many sunflower seeds for my birds, and I know
Mm-mm.
I'll eat half of them, but I'm like, I'm not going to starve the birds. I don't want to starve.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and so with your garden, is your produce not the best produce you've ever had in your life?
Yeah. The stuff that we've had so far, we did pull a radish out and we got a couple potatoes. The main thing we've had, we had some peppers last year and tomatoes and then herbs. We've got basil, chives, yeah, peppermint and dill
Hmm.
as well. So it's nice, like you're making salmon. Just you almost forget that I have to remember, like, oh, like, I'm gonna make some eggs. I have chives outside, like, but you just like remember those things, and you have to like remember that you have this garden at your disposal. And then some of the tomatoes are starting to come in. Some of the we've got blueberry, cherry tomatoes, and a bunch coming in. So that's like the one plant that I'm trying to like figure out a little bit because it's overwhelming if you think about all of them because you try and
Yeah.
figure out when, and then there's tons of weeds in there because even that lasagna method didn't stop everything. And then there's raspberries that are coming up because there have been raspberries in that garden before, so that's cool. But it's a daily. Thank God we've been getting a lot of rain here. This is the one of the rainiest seasons we've had here, according to my partner in like years. It's probably the second or third rainiest season ever. So from a gardening perspective, it's been amazing because it's just like otherwise you have to be sitting out there every morning with the hose and stuff though. But I did learn that we just planted trees. Obviously those need to be like watered every day, but the lady at the tree place, I forgot what the name of this.
Supply? Oh no, not the trees. Okay.
Yeah, it's she heard it on Rogan or something like that. It's something trees. I'll get to find the main name, but it's a very obvious name to order trees from. But we ordered old, a little bit older, at least like 4 foot high. Just you're not starting from like just a sapling or something like that. But she said if you lay a hose out there and you have it on a trickle on a really hot day, if you do it in the morning and you let that run for 10 minutes, the cold water goes into the ground, gets deep into the ground, and they'll pull from there on a really hot day, as opposed to just sitting out there watering it and trying to hope that'll soak in. You
Right.
just let the trickle sit there, like the hose sit there for like 10 minutes, which I thought was cool.
Awesome.
Just the stuff you learn, man.
Well, I mean, and there are people there that will they have experience in that and they can teach you, and they're cool with teaching you, not like, well, don't take up my space or whatever.
Yeah.
I love going to those places where people are free to talk. Like they love sharing that information
Yeah.
because it's so helpful. Because
Well,
there's
there's no shortage of YouTube videos for every single thing you can think about. Like anything you can, there's
yeah,
people, growing a ton of stuff on like a quarter of the space we have here. So it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, but it's a lot to keep track of. It's a lot to learn about, and it's a
Oh
lot
yeah.
to take care of.
Yeah.
So I hear that. But anyway, so are your tomatoes coming in okay so far?
Yeah, from what I can see. Yeah, so far. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
And are you guys making jam yet this year?
She made some jam. She got some rhubarb at the farmer's market, so it wasn't our strawberries or our rhubarb, but she definitely we made a batch last year, so that's also tricky because you gotta do that boiling where you seal the containers and make
Mm-hmm.
sure that that's done. I did start making bread, so kind of picked that up when we went to go visit a friend of hers in Hawaii who was like a really good chef, and she had a really good book out about bread making. And I just, we were just hanging out. It was kind of vacation time, so I just kind of read the whole book, and I was like, I've always liked baking. When I was younger, I used to like go to the library, get recipes, and just try stuff out. So it was always something I've been interested in. I've always like loved cooking and just I like recipes because I can just follow instructions. I'm not big on like opening the fridge and making something out of like what's in there. My partner can do that easily. I'm like, I need my recipe. I need my instructions. I need exactly to know what's going where. And so it was sourdough was a little tricky because you got to get the starter going. So that I figured it out a couple times. So I've made I made about 4 or 5 loaves, and it's nice. It's a good feeling, to be able to
For
make
you.
something like that. And that's very hearty. And unfortunately, my partner's reducing the gluten intake, so I end up having to eat that whole loaf, which is good.
Well, you can make friends.
Yeah, yeah. We had our neighbors when we were in south of town. One time they brought over a loaf of bread, which is nice.
Yeah.
Very neighborly.
Yeah. Yeah, you
Mhm.
could totally like, I'm sorry, I can't stop baking this bread and I have extra. Could
Yeah.
you take one of these loaves for me?
Yes. Yeah.
And you could bring it with jam when you guys have jam.
That's true. Yes.
Yeah. Farmers markets are great. I mean, I love supporting the farmers, and it's if it's not going to come from your yard, it's better to come from local at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I've been learning in the conversations that I've had that food, a lot of the food that you pick loses so much of the nutritional value
Hmm.
instantly. So
Yeah.
like when it's being trucked across the country, like you're basically you you're not getting much out of that. But
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, just a matter of because we were looking at this website for this woman, Bree, I forgot what her name is, but she's got a whole I think she's got sponsors and stuff because she's got like hundreds of thousands of followers or something at this point. But she's big on preserving, obviously, because she grows so much stuff that she's like tons and tons of tomatoes, and now she's doing freeze drying as well. So we were looking at the freeze dryer at the Tractor Supply store, and it was like $2,000, something like that. Those things are no joke.
holy moly. And they're like a dryer. It's like
Yeah,
huge.
yeah. It's a counter size thing. It's pretty big, but yeah. But I think regular preserving or dehydration saves you can save like I think it's like half of the nutrients and it lasts like for a couple of weeks. But freeze drying saves like I heard it's like 97% of like the nutritional value and it'll last for like 6 months if done properly. So it's pretty interesting, especially if you're going to that effort of like growing all this stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I tried one year, well, I can my tomatoes every year, and one year I was like, it's so hot. I really do not want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna freeze them. It's gonna be the same.
Mm-hmm.
It'll taste the same. And then we had a hurricane and we lost
Mm-hmm.
power for a week. So it was all gone.
Mm,
All trash,
yeah.
compost. But that is so I make a point to can now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Uh, but freeze drying, that's very expensive.
Yeah.
If you were to get one, I bet you could like rent it out, like not,
Mm.
like share it with neighbors or something like that. Go in on it
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you'd have to really use it, like grow a lot to make it, pay for itself.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But anyway. And so let's talk about also the vertical farming podcast. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so in late 2019, one of my podcasting clients, a podcast production agency, gave me a book called Abundance by Peter Diamandis. He's like a kind of futurist, talks about what's happening and where the world is headed, and like kind of predictions in like decades down the line. And one of them was about the whole chapter about food, the future of food, and they mentioned vertical farming, and I thought that was interesting. It's this idea of growing produce indoors. It started mainly with leafy greens because that's kind of the best option for that. It's
Right.
now expanded, and people are growing tomatoes and strawberries and experimenting with other crops. There's people successfully doing like even potatoes. I've heard, testing out like with hydroponics, smaller ones, not large ones. And obviously they can, and if they work in partnership with a greenhouse, they're even testing out things like starting saplings, like trees from seed in the indoor farm, and then gradually as they grow, moving them to the greenhouse as opposed to starting them in the greenhouse, and they're having much more success. So it's been interesting, and I just thought it was an interesting thing to look into and learn more. But obviously, since I'm a podcaster, I wanted to see if I could create a popular show. So I called it the most obvious name possible. It's the Vertical Farming Podcast. The domain was available, verticalfarmingpodcast.com. So I grabbed all the socials, and I wanted it to be high visibility. So I focused on CEOs and founders. So 95% of the guests have been CEOs and founders. And that gives me like a nice relationship. And because of my first podcast, I'm comfortable with long form interviews. So I'm able to have a conversation, even about a topic that I don't understand, because I'm just asking them about their origin stories, how they get into the business, why they started it, why it's important for them.
Right.
And so it's been 4 years, 130 plus interviews. It's the number one show within vertical farming, specifically. And my sponsors, have flown me to Dubai to podcasting conference, and it's generated thousands of dollars in sponsorship because I'm dealing with these companies that have marketing budgets. So that was kind of the idea coming from a corporate marketing background. Like I knew you got to deal with companies that have money to spend and they want to get in front of this unique audience. So now I go to like 2 or 3 indoor farming conferences a year. And it's nice. It's fun to go there, and then people are like, "Oh, Harry, I love the show. I was binging your episodes on the way to the conference," and so it's been fun to see. I thought it was going to run for a couple of seasons, and I was going to run out of people to interview. But every time I go to a conference, I have like 5 or 6 more new names and making new connections, and so it's taken on a life of its own. It's pretty wild, like going from like zero visibility in that niche
Right.
to then being like somewhat of like a voice in there. And everyone that I talk to, these CEOs are just like, hey, we really like appreciate what you're doing for the industry and having, putting these kind of conversations out there. And I recently merged that aspect of it, the Vertical Farming Podcast, with a newsletter, a website called I Grow News. He's based out of France, but he talks about a lot what's happening in the US. And we've created what's called the Ag Tech Media Group, and we're trying to actually maybe even like raise a little bit of funds for revamping the website. And so it's kind of like picking up steam, and I don't know where it's going to go from here, but just kind of a lot of new opportunities that have come up because of it. So, and it's just made me aware of like the importance of access to hyper local food, because a lot of people, kind of like the dirty little secret about local produce is, I think, depending on the state, I don't know if it's a federal designation, but it can be up to, I think, like 400 miles away for it to be considered local, which is like not what you think of when you think of local. So
Right.
vertical farming is like redefining that term, and they've started to use the term hyper local, because you have like these chefs growing these mushrooms in a container farm like right next to the restaurant, right? So you literally are picking the mushroom, cooking it, and putting it on the plate, and so you can just literally show the diner that like this is about as local as it gets. And you
Yeah.
can taste the difference. And I've been more aware when I'm in the grocery stores, just because of the podcast and these conversations, I start to look at this produce, like where's it come from? And
Right.
everyone knows that most of it comes from California and Salinas Valley, and it flies 3,000 miles to get here, so there's a lot of travel expense, and it's not as fresh. That bagged lettuce will probably last you a couple of days once you open it. And if you don't open it, maybe 3 or 4 days, and you can just see it just starts to get mushy. But it's so funny to look at. We're eating like greens from a company called Revel Greens, based out of. They have a greenhouse here in Minnesota. There's no real vertical farms in Minnesota. There's mostly greenhouses, but that lettuce, man, will last probably like 2 weeks, and it's fresh I mean, over time, it'll wilt, but it's noticeably crunchier and like you wouldn't think like you you could distinguish flavors or from lettuce, but like you notice the difference when you have that, and then it's just like you can't go back to like the bagged lettuce after that.
Totally, totally. Well, and I mean, and you noticed because it's in your kitchen, but you were saying it lasts longer, but because it hasn't had to drive across the country.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I love everything gardening. I wish I was a better gardener, but I do not like the heat. Uh
Mm.
or the bugs or the rain.
Mhm.
But so that's and so you are interviewing CEOs of these companies, and do obviously you're asking about their companies, but are you, now that you're gardening, could you like be like, hey, do you got any tips for
Yeah, it's a completely different business model because they're some of them are coming from non-farming backgrounds because they're running these huge operations, and a
Mm,
lot of them, I mean, it's a big category because you think it's super niche vertical farming, but it could be anything from people that are letting you grow like you see these towers where you can grow like lettuce and herbs there. Some of them are really like beautiful. You could like put them on a counter. They've got these like nice designs. So you've got those sort of like the consumer model. There's some that actually are like counter under the counter with like a glass door and everything,
oh,
and they've got robotics. Not robotics, but like AI, and so they're monitoring, and then the thing is spinning around. So those are obviously much more pricier, and they're working with like home developers to kind of put those in some of these fancier homes. But so it runs the gamut on the consumer side, and then as they start to go out into like um, the bigger ones for dealing with wholesalers or dealing with like supermarkets, they start at like the shipping containers, which is a pretty common model, and some of them are specifically made, within the industry for leafy greens or mushrooms or certain types of crops. But they've got all like the light LED lights in there, and there's like usually an app, because they've got sensors built in to track stuff. So they make it really like helpful. They do a lot of hand holding for the farmers, and then it gets into the bigger companies, companies like Plenty, that are growing like in huge multi-thousand square foot warehouses. I think Plenty just opened up a couple last year a huge indoor farm in Compton of all places, to just like to think that like a neighborhood like that is now going to have access to like fresh food, whereas before it was a food desert. And then there's other companies. Gotham Greens is a pretty big one. Arrow Farms recently went through a bankruptcy, so there's some challenges because in the industry itself, because people are getting into it and think of it as a technology company, but really you have to have farming chops because you have to know what you're doing, and growing. There's more challenges with like people growing indoors as opposed to growing in soil right outside. So you have to. There's a lot of things to be thinking about because you have the biggest expense that is electricity.
mhm,
That's kind of like not the dirty little secret about indoor farming, but just the biggest thing that people don't talk about a lot is like it takes a lot of energy to like run these farms, and so like
right.
they're always looking at like unit economics and like how much sense does it make to grow this, and are we selling it at a price point that allow us to make money? And so the margins are like razor thin until the cost of energy comes down. It's going to be more of a challenge.
Mm,
But it is needed in some places with extreme climate. Like when I went to Dubai, it was like they import I think 98 or 99% of their food there, like because of the desert. So but they've got a ton of the oil money, so now they're building these huge indoor farms, and now it's like for the first time ever, they literally have access to hyper local fresh produce, whereas before they didn't. And so,
amazing.
yeah, it's been interesting just to learn as I go, and just just asking questions about the industry, and just kind of piquing my own curiosity. So that's what's been fun for me.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's really I love that about Dubai that, because they have so much oil money that they can afford to just build all new, and these things are,
Yeah.
now that they're set up, they'll just continue to do their thing, hopefully. Um, but and I never realized that they didn't grow stuff, but it makes sense because it's like sand.
Yeah, it was so interesting to be there, and everything that you see there that's green. If you're on the roads, you'll see trees, but then you'll see like hoses running to everything, every tree, everything has got because there's just so completely dry there, and they're running these, I think these desalination plants. They're pulling in water from the ocean, and they're like, I don't know what's happening where underground or something, but like they've got to get the water to these plants anywhere. But it's like you're in the desert, so it's like it's interesting how propped up it is, in terms to show anything that's there that's green. You literally have to kind of build an infrastructure to keep everything watered because they don't get a lot of rain either. I think I just read something that a couple of months ago they tried cloud seeding or something like that, and of course you start messing with nature, they ended up getting like torrential downpours and like flooding and stuff. So, and obviously, if you've never gotten rain, your streets are not your systems are not set up for drainage, right? You don't have sewer systems and stuff like that. So there was some severe flooding, I think, in the UAE or somewhere in Dubai, I think, because they were just trying to experiment and mess around with nature.
Cloud seeding? What?
Cloud seeding.
What is that?
There's technologies and certain like I don't know if it's metals or ionized crystals or something like that. You can go on a plane and you can fly through clouds and you disperse them in the clouds, and it sort of like activates something that can cause rain. So yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's wild.
Yeah.
Holy moly. Gosh, that's fascinating. That is fascinating. And I guess for your personal gardening, probably the farmers market, talking to your farmers at the farmers market about recommendations and stuff would probably
Yeah,
more
the
help.
farmers market, and honestly, like, yeah, there's just you start following all these like homesteading Instagram accounts, and they get really detailed, and they're so popular. They've got hundreds and thousands of like followers, so they're continuously creating content, and they're just sitting there with their camera and just kind of showing you, okay, it's like tomato picking season, so this is what you need to look out for, and so there's really no excuses for learning what you need to, there are a couple of books that we bought, but like for the most part, we can just watch a couple of videos and kind of get the gist of what we need.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I just I mean, I just love enlisting the help of the farmers because I love farmers, and they also know your region and what's gonna.
Yes.
But I love that you're gardening. That's so fun. I mean, it really is, and it's not. You can know everything, and there's so many things out of your control.
Oh yeah, it's never gonna stop.
I mean, last year was Maine's wettest summer in like 100 years or something, and it was
Mm,
farmers were just, I can't imagine. I can't imagine doing that. I would be so anxious all the time if it was a summer like last summer because all the plants drowned. They just were so
mm,
soggy and they didn't grow and they
yeah,
have CSAs to manage and what are you going to put out there if everything is so wet? I don't know.
yeah,
That's beyond me. But they definitely know the issues that you would have in the area that you are. But
yeah, for sure.
I love that you guys are doing this. I do. That's so fun. I mean, I love that you're a city guy and you moved to the country-ish and you're making it work. I think that's
Yeah,
super cool. And I just there's so much to learn. I mean, nature is always changing and there's just a lot to appreciate. There's a lot of struggles, but
yeah,
there's just a lot to it and it's a whole different world than being in the
yeah,
city, right?
for sure.
Do you love it though?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean it's a lot to learn, and there's like you said, it's never gonna be not gonna be. There's always gonna be something to do. So I think that's really the important thing to think about long term. Like we did a lot this season, get everything ready, but it doesn't mean that there's not going to be a ton of stuff to do and just little things here and there, and you just kind of have to accept that there should always be like fixing something up or learning something or something's going wrong, and you gotta kind of, especially you start getting to bigger properties like this, it's like there's a lot to think about, and occasionally you'll hear like some animal getting like killed in the middle of the night, and so it's like screaming out like a rabbit or something like those, like that's nature doing its thing, just like, or you'll see a hawk, snatch a blue jay baby out of its nest, and just like it's heartbreaking stuff, but you're like, I mean, it happens all the time. We just don't see it, right? But when you start to see it, you're just like, hey, this circle of life stuff going on all over.
Yeah, for sure. Well,
Yeah.
Keep an eye on your chickens because they'll.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so when I say the word sustainability, Harry, what does that mean to you?
Hmm. Um, I think for me, it's mainly being more conscious of like the impact I'm having, and conscious of the decisions we make with what we buy, and then starting to see things like, are there ways that we could just really like be self-sustainable? Like I think about self-sustainability, like in terms of like, my partner's making like a lot of teas now, whereas we would have bought teas before. So little things like even just making the bread and just, and she's gotten kind of getting into, she wants to create this like apothecary vibe. So she's like looking at the medicinal value of plants and how can we heal, and like, just fascinated by this idea of like having an apothecary of like tinctures and solvents and stuff that you've made because you've done the research that the root of this specific plant, if you distill it down and you put it in like 100 proof vodka, and then eventually you'll create it's all that stuff. So it's nice to start thinking about like that self-sustainability of like having your own pharmacy, how it used to be, right? So yeah, just being able to take care of ourselves, I think, is something we're conscious of, and it's going to be a long journey because it's, I don't know that we'll fully go completely off the grid, but it's nice just even having access to our own water, just little things like that are more important and top of mind lately.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have to go all in. It's not required.
Yeah.
We can do what we can do.
Yeah. I'm still asking ChatGPT anytime I have a question about something farming, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah. It's like, I mean, it's pretty wild. I do more searches now on ChatGPT, just random questions. Like I was in this office, I've got like I set up my DJ equipment and I put my vinyl in there, but I had to get casters wheels for the case, and I was like, I wonder how much weight these will hold and I wonder how heavy they'll be. So I went to ChatGPT. I said, I have the IKEA 8-panel shelf, and I'm going to put in full of vinyl. Like, how heavy will this be? And it said, oh, okay. You probably have the blah, blah, blah model, which is the most common 8 shelf. And each vinyl typically weighs about a pound, and there's 8 panels. You could fit 60 in each panel. So that would be blah, blah, blah. And so you're looking at a total of about 444 pounds. And I was like, I literally was just sitting there for 30 in the aisle of the hardware store. Like, that's when you realize, like, it's people get freaked out about like the robots and like, you mentioned going off grid, but there's a way that we can kind of work together, I think, in a way that's like they're helping us remove like kind of take care of this heavy lifting for us, to free up our time so we can like do this stuff, because like, oh, I would have had to spend like 20 minutes in front of a computer to do that. Now I can just like ask it on my phone, and in 30 seconds I get an answer back. So it's pretty interesting where we're headed.
Yeah. Or buy it and realize that it was not sturdy enough, or
Yeah.
But so what's next? What's next on the Duran homestead?
I think in this space that we have this separate garage, the storage space, but we're kind of crafting, kind of partitioning out a section that's kind of like a greenhouse vibe, or just like a place to start like the seedlings. And so my partners kind of have a space there. And the idea, I mean, maybe we eventually add a full-on greenhouse to this building, but that's next level. But just having a space and just thinking about, because we're already thinking about like when fall comes and, redoing the lasagna thing again on the soil to kind of like tamp down the weeds there and just reinforcing, so it's interesting thinking about the seasons. And she follows this author who recently published a book. And this author for the last 7 years she's got a pretty big property, but she's gone out and picked like something from her garden and made these beautifully elaborate, and she's taken a photo of it, and she published a picture book. And there's this Japanese concept of like micro seasons. And apparently, like if you pay attention to nature close enough, like every 7-ish days, I think it was 7 to 12 days, something like that. Something's changing. So we think of the seasons as like the major changes happening, but what they were saying, and I think it comes from, a Japanese way of thinking in terms of gardening. Like if you really pay attention and you start to see, even in a plant, like you'll see like certain things, like on your plants, like you'll see a flower bloom or something like that, or, or like
Okay.
certain leaves come out, after a certain time. But I think it's been interesting because my partner pointed this out. And so if you spend a lot of time outside and you start paying attention and you notice, oh, something looks different here, like 7, 8 days later, like, and it's this idea of these micro seasons, I think they're called, something like that. So I thought that was interesting. So it's just kind of being conscious of that. And so there's always something to be aware of and something to prepare for. And it really, it's, a full year, like it's just a full-time, task. But there's cycles. And so I think I've learned to um, be better with the cycles, because when I was in LA, it was just like, 65 all the time. And if it dropped to 55, you need a hoodie, and that's the coldest it gets. But we get -20 here. And so I think it's just, yeah, realizing that, a lot of people use that time for like to go inward, and to, slow down and reflect. And so I think leaning into that, I think is a helpful mindset.
Cool. All right. I love the being mindful idea in sustainability. Like, just for me, I take that on a lot. I can't do everything, but I can be more mindful about what I'm bringing in, what I'm creating. Um,
Yeah.
um, I love that. I love that for you. That's really fun. But so, if people want to find you and I'm your podcast, because you don't post a lot.
Yeah. I think the best thing to do is I've got my domain harryduran.com. It's my newsletter. It's called The Life Worth Living, and I started that a while ago, and it was meant to be like a weekly podcast. I mean, a weekly podcast, a weekly newsletter. So I did it weekly for a couple of years, and then it kind of slowed down. So I'm kind of back into like a flow. But it's just kind of me sharing my story of like my life. And so I mix in everything there. Like if I'm working on a new DJ mix, if I mentioned something about the garden, I talk about like my ADHD, I talk about podcasting. So it's like a mix, but it's just a reminder to people, like, share your life publicly, because you never know who's listening, and you got to share the good and the bad. You just don't, it's not like an Instagram feed where you got to share your best moments. Like, you have to be willing to be vulnerable. And I've gotten some really positive feedback on it. It's not a huge, I think it's got like 1,200 subscribers, nothing crazy, but it's like, I just made a conscious change to shift away from like a marketing email. And so now this is coming from me personally. So it's the closest thing to me in terms of what's going on in my world. And then I just let people know, like, I have this section at the bottom. This is what I created this week. And it could be like, I created a podcast, I baked a loaf of bread, I made a DJ mix. Like, it's just, they're all creations, right? So it's just stuff that's coming out of my creativity. So I think it's been a helpful, medium for me to kind of like have just share what's on my mind. And just never know, you never know when something you share could be valuable for someone.
Heck yeah. So
Yeah.
harryduran.com.
Yeah.
Cool. And podcasts are
Podcast Junkies and the Vertical Farming Podcast, you can find anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast.
yeah, check it out, everyone. And so Podcast Junkies is a really fun one. This is the one that I was on, but so if you were saying that is kind of based on like Inside the Actor's Studio,
Yeah.
right? But it's in about podcasters.
Yeah.
So
Inside
that's
the
really cool.
podcaster studio.
Yeah. Anyway, but thank you so much, Harry. This has been so fun. I love getting to know about your farm adventures.
Yeah, it's probably the longest I've spoken at my podcast interview, but I always mention them or throw some chicken comment in on my show. So yeah, it's been helpful to think about the journey so far, and interesting to see where it goes. I do post occasional stuff. I talk about it in newsletter, so that's probably the best place to get updates, and occasionally on my Instagram as well. So
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I really
yeah,
appreciate
thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
I just want to take a second to thank my guest again for speaking with me and sharing such great information. I love having these conversations with folks. I also want to thank Buzzsprout for hosting the podcast, for Jane Bolduck and her music genius, for Becca Coffron and her award-winning artwork. And thank you for listening. I appreciate that so much. Please check out the show notes for any links and extra information. And if you would like to follow my guest and find out more about them, I'm sure they would love the follow. And if you don't mind leaving a rating or review wherever you're listening, and just help to get this podcast in front of new eyes, that would be amazing. I would really love that. And feel free to reach out to me on the socials and let me know what you're thinking. And if you would like to be a guest on the podcast, please let me know that. I would love to have a conversation with you about sustainability. All right. Thank you again. I hope you have a great rest of the week.
There'll come a day, my mama told me, when I find love to have and hold me, a heart that's strong and so sincere. Just tell me, how do I get there from here? Oh, tell me, get there from here, 'cause here and now I'm so far down that mercy's bound to find me. We'll find a way to soothe the sickness, we'll heal the ache with sweet forgiveness. Wages of war will disappear. Just tell me, how do I get there from here? I wonder, how do I get there from here? Yeah, 'cause here now I'm so far down, and mercy's bound to find me. When that state of grace has finally found me, well, there'll be music, ooh, and good friends around me, yeah. And I'll just smile through happy tears and wonder